Well, it's great to be here today. I'm basically going to be going over, it's a very large topic. So we're going to kind of pack as much in an hour as we possibly can. The whole point of meeting today is to just talk about, start to finish, how to produce, become your own producer, how to go from an idea and to make it a reality, whether that be an exhibition, an event, they all kind of apply to the same method, at least in the way that I handle things. So I just have a quick table of content. We'll do these things in order. I have a practice that I call finish to start. We'll talk about space and how do you approach space in regards to events. Permitting, that could be a very long topic, but I'll try to kind of melt it in. Safety, which is something we should always be thinking about. Insurance and what it does and does not cover, where you should get it. Budgeting as it relates to events, and then also just promotion, which is something that we don't always think about in the full picture. That leads me to just a little bit about me. I apologize, all these bad photos in here are of me, and some of them are from a long time ago, but I figured I'd have a little fun with you guys. I'm an artist. I have been practicing art in Dallas for close to 20 years. I got my career started in commercial photography and fine art photography. And because of that, I pretty much learned most of the producing skills that I have today. So naturally, that kind of fed into me being a producer for all different types of events and exhibitions. I also do freelance curating. I'm an organizer, which sometimes is like producing, but also sometimes it's just more about collaborating and building groups that will take the production on. And advocate, if it involves artists, North Texas, the community in any way, just dangle that carrot in front of my face and I will bite it. I love this community so much. I always try to give back as much as I can. What I do, I work on art exhibitions, my own, but also other artists. I'm currently working with Aurora, which we've been around since 2010, and we hold a biennial, but we also have moved into year-round programming. I previously worked at the Cedars Union, and before that I worked with Art Conspiracy ArtCon. So all have involved different stages and levels of engagement with the arts. Performances, this also applies to, I happen to be a performance artist, so I have that in there, but I've also worked with performances that include music or, just like kind of really, really bizarre approach to live art representation, live events. These are both indoor or outdoor, which also have their own complications. And sometimes they're intimate, intimate to me is like 10 to 50, large, anything over 100. To give you an idea, a scale, we were working towards pre-pandemic, an event that was supposed to be ready for 50,000 people. So now the finish before you start is a method that I like to use. It saved me a lot of headaches over the years. It's something that I learned, as I said earlier, from the photography community. And one of the things that I love about this is also it's about teamwork. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but what does it mean? It means, we're all visual people, but if you want to have an exhibition or you want to have an event, I always tell people, well, you should attend your own event before you plan your own event. And that goes down to everything. What door you went through, what time of day was it? What were the acoustics like in there? What are the walls like in there? How are you installing? Where's your performance space? And this will help you really start to, whittle down. It also, just from a conceptual, as an artist perspective, it's helped change my work as I go along the way, because I find flaws, and I get to fix them in advance before, it's go time. I'm in install day or in pre-pro, and you have to find a band-aid. This gives you a chance to actually find a legitimate fix instead of having to be in a panic. Uh, it also helps you identify specific key needs. Certain things like this will relate to some space, related as far as venue. Uh, it's like when you do your visits, when you're thinking through the space, are there enough fire extinguishers? Do you have enough space for the amount of people you want to have? How do you figure out, what is your general attendance? It's like we like to think of art and events as like the happening, but the way that I describe art and events is that that's about 15%. What the audience and what people see is 85%. You know, work that happened beforehand. And if you did your 85% well, then they will never notice any of the mistakes, and it'll look just the way it's supposed to. You'll save money. If you can do this in advance, you will find these, quick fixes cost a lot of money, usually because, say you couldn't order it, you don't have the 2 weeks to order that specific item anymore because you didn't identify it. So now you're overnighting things, or you're having to go buy it like at a specialty shop in town, that's like 100%, more expensive than it would be otherwise. So it's just these tiny little things, but they make a huge difference in the end. Um, and then it also lets you see where you need help. It's like art to me is done through teamwork. It's done through collaboration. As you identify, say you need a structure that will hold this, then you have the time to find the team that you want to work with. So this is all these benefits happen if you really just finish your event before you begin, your full, motion into action. So, however this works for you. For me, it's lying around a lot with a notebook nearby. And then I have a lot of conversations. I ask a lot of questions. I float ideas past people, and we really start to see things come together. Just some examples. There could be a lot more photos, but this is a piece I did last December called Resist, Relive, Proceed. And just some of the stuff, on the far right was, the final product from drone footage. But I had to do a lot of, thinking in the foreground before I even got to install. So, it's like because I was able to realize and recognize certain things like quarry stone, was going to cost, it's a 300% markup compared to what I had budgeted for. So I had time to find an alternative and was able to go with recycled concrete, which in the end also was a great thing because I could return it, which I also didn't know that you can't return rocks once they are removed from a quarry. These are all kind of examples. Measure out your space, plan, your full site. That goes for anything. Like this was an outdoor experience, but if you're inside, it's like you're going to need to build a site plan at some point. You need your measurements. You need to lay out your design. I had an old studio mate. She was probably the oldest example of me seeing this, but she used to build maquettes of the gallery that she was exhibiting in. And then she would make 2-scale little foam core paintings. And she would, rearrange her exhibition until she liked it. And then she was able to translate that to the gallery walls directly. And she just had the time. There was a lot of time saved in the end on the install. And then just use technology that is out there for you. This image on the far left may look foreign. It's something I like to use. It's Sunseeker. It's a program for, sunrise, sunset, and also, cardinal directions. So if it's an outdoor experience and you're thinking about time of day, you want to know where your audience is going to be. You want to know like shadows, we're visual people. So it's like, where are things going to be? These are all just important little steps. Um, so I knew exactly where I was going to lay. I knew how the light was going to travel that day. Um, Also, just from a safety standpoint, for me as a performer, I was able to keep track of the hours of the day discreetly, just by knowing its point in the sky. Now find your space. This is, you're your own location scout. Uh, you need to you need to visit it. You need to find it. Once you found it, go back as many times as they will let you. Uh, this is just an example of what I would do for an outdoor experience. Is that I go back multiple times during the day and night. Of course, depending on, if this is for sure a daytime experience, then the nighttime captures aren't as necessary. But, visit your space, become comfortable in your space, measure your space. Other examples, it's like when you take your visits, it's like lay out your zones. It's every place is different. You'll see this warehouse that is on the left-hand side of the screen. Um, there was no AC in here. There was nothing that you could really use to affix to the walls. The lighting was rough. There was one roll-up door. These are things that I could identify in advance and take a copious amount of notes. Just you can never have too many notes when finding your space. I also highly recommend, you look at the bottom right, uh, put people or cars or something that has like a good scale reference for you in your location photos. Because once you get home, it's really nice to know kind of how things really are in size, even when you have measurements. So, and also, finding space is all about, what's right for the experience. I'm a huge fan of, going outside the white walls and try something, bizarre, obscure, you name it. Last year, because of the pandemic, the upper right, that's a parking garage, is probably to date one of my most favorite locations that has ever been transformed into an art space. I never would have figured that it worked. Just to give a little, we scouted, we looked at a bunch of different garages until we landed on this one. Uh, and it's because it, aesthetically was the right fit, and height and all sorts of different factors came into play. So finding your space is difficult sometimes, but it is key and you need to know it in advance. Let's talk about permitting. This is the thing that kind of causes big hiccups for all kinds of different questions for people. Uh, we'll spend probably the biggest chunk here, but just there's multiple different types of permits. You need to know why you need to have them. I was told years ago that risk management Erica is my least favorite Erica, but I get it. It's like by the book is how I like to do things. And that takes a lot of planning, takes a lot of understanding, it takes a lot of work with government entities sometimes, and just kind of learning the ins and outs. The city is not here to um, shut down your experience or your exhibition or whatever, but they do need it to follow code, and that's just the law. So in order to be able to come back again and again and again to these people, I highly recommend you just get to know the process, you get to know the people. They'll really, really, really be helpful later on as you continue down this process. So just some certain questions, basic things to begin with. Dates. You have the date, say you have a 2-day exhibition. Well, always make sure you consider install and deinstall, or on the forms, it may say load in and load out. Uh, you have to take that wide range of dates is very key. So try to think about it in that aspect. You're going to need it for a lot of different paperwork. Your location, this goes back to space. Just make sure that you've identified, obviously, indoor versus outdoor. They require different types of permits. Then also there's, residential or business district, areas when you're looking for your space. If it's a residential area, you're going to have to deal with a few more challenges, especially if you have sound involved. Business district are a little more lenient on certain things like that. So just kind of knowing what you're going for, what you're aiming for. Some spaces and some venues are already set up for a lot of these features, which is really nice. But once you know the code and you know the rules, it'll really kind of make things easier as you head into the permitting discussion. Really need to, is this private property? Is this public property? It makes a big difference. Private property will require, certain types of letters that you'll need to get. Public property, that will, apply to different types of permitting requests you're gonna either be made of you or that you're gonna need to ask. And also, I didn't put in here, but just right away and like ingress and egress and, how you go in, how you go out. Are you on a sidewalk? Certain stuff like that, because all of this plays into, the permit. And then infrastructure. This is stuff that you're doing, finish to start. This is the information you need to be collecting when you're looking at your spaces. Infrastructure, what's there, what isn't. A big one is always, are there bathrooms? Are there fire extinguishers? What type of power is in there? If there is power, do you have enough power? If you don't know what your power draw, which means how much power you're going to be, how much each item you're using is going to require. You have to add all that up together to figure out your total power draw, and know if your infrastructure that you have in your space will fit that. An example is, say it doesn't, then maybe you have to bring in a generator. That's going to affect your permitting applications. Also, it's a cost that you can identify in the front. And also, there's multiple different types of generators. So there's certain things that, it's like a collection game. It's all about details, as many details as you can get. It's like a lot of us just want to get to the actual day, but the more detail collecting you do, the better off you're going to be. I picked this image as a nod to Cedars Union. This was a Saluna event, so it was a collaboration of a visual artist and a sound artist. And this was probably one of the more interesting approaches that had to be worked through with permitting for certain reasons. It's just like it blocked, a fire exit. The instrument did, and there was cabling that had to, how do you run the cabling so that it didn't, ever cross a footpath? This was a seated audience. It's very different, in how you can get capacity and what kind of capacity you'll ended up getting approved for. So, and then it was a nighttime event. So we had a lot of parking and a lot of safety issues to address for the patrons. Now we'll get into, there are two permits that you'll more than likely be dealing with. This talk is pretty much 100% geared towards Dallas. But each city has a different approach and has these permit structures. They're just called different things. Um, there's the temporary assembly permit. This is still relatively new. It's been around for several years now, but it's not kind of fully understood. So you'll see TAP a lot. That's what it is. This specific permit goes through the fire marshal, as opposed to pretty much every other permit you'll need, which is through the Dallas Office of Special Events. If you see OSE on things, that's what it means. The Dallas Office of Arts and Culture did a really nice job on their website. If you go under the funding category, there's a whole section on permitting. Also, just a little side note, if you get grants for events now with the city, I believe that, permitting and all this stuff is now very much part of their paperwork. So the TAP permit, I believe that there'll be a talk with Officer Wilson soon coming up at Cedar Union. So he's the pro here, it's his baby, but I have worked with it many times. So just some good things to know in advance. I had somebody working on an event just the last couple of weeks. I'm in a weird space. I don't know what to do. Call Erica is kind of where I've ended up in the city, which I'm very grateful to be able to help people. And one of the first questions I always ask is, what's the CO designation? And a lot of people don't know what that question means, or even what a CO is all about. So the certificate of occupancy designates the use of that particular building. So the TAP permit is simply a window of time in which a different use can apply to that space. For an example, it's like a lot of, it's like spaces that I've worked in are designated office warehouse. So their capacity is usually very low on their certificate of occupancy. So for instance, say I wanted to do an event in an office warehouse and it was over 100 people, more than likely the CO was like for 20. So I would have to apply for this permit in order to get the capacity for that duration set to what I'm applying for. Now you need to do a whole bunch of paperwork in order to do any type of permitting. So this goes back to, again, when you're looking at space, when you're thinking of your event, from the finish point all the way to the beginning, you need your site plan. This comes down to your measurements. They're pretty specific about site plans. It's something that it took me a while to get them down. I came a long way from some of my original site plans, which used to just be on graph paper. Now they can be as specific as needing to be on the official architectural renderings of the floor plan, which I always think if you're capable of doing that, that's an outstanding way to do it. And you need to have everything in your site plan. It's like, where's the entrance? Where's the exit? What are your fire escapes? Where are your fire extinguishers? Where are your bathrooms? Everything. If you're going to have a bar in there, that has to be labeled as well. So basically, anything you see in the physical space that's not actually the four walls, the ceiling, or the floor, you should designate if it involves your event or a safety feature. You're also going to need to create a parking plan. These can be done multiple ways. I like to use, at least to start, it's just like a little cheat, but I use Google Satellite View. And then from Satellite View, I can draw different, shapes to kind of designate where I want parking to be, and then kind of hone in. That's twofold. If you identify your parking in advance, you might be able to approach businesses around to see if you can get them to donate their parking space. See if you're up against parking pricing. Um, See if you're going to need valet or something like that. That's also something you'll need to designate in your permit. Um, and then yeah, just you'll need a parking plan for permitting as well. If this is a private property, you'll also need, and which is true of pretty much all tap permits, you're going to need a letter of permission from the property owner. So uh, just get that as soon as you can. It needs to include all your dates, not just your event date. And um, they'll probably need, if you plan on not selling, but serving alcohol, selling too, you'll need a permission letter from the property owner as well for that. Now, the Office of Special Events, I pulled this off of their front page. You can go. This is a quick, do I need a special event permit list or not? And I'll kind of walk you through what happens. But, it's pretty much a given. If you're over 100 people in attendance, and that's not all at once, that's total attendance. Meaning, if this is 2 days and you're expecting, 50 people each day, that's 100 people. If you have, 40 people each day, and, it's like, then you have a crew of 20, all of that adds up. It's your attendees are also your crew and yourself, and so on and so forth. So if it's a body and it's there, it counts. If you're selling any merch, food or beverage, that's a permit. If you're doing a tent larger than 399 square feet, which is pretty much, they've changed the wording on this. It's pretty much anything over those 10 by 10 pop-ups that you can buy. That's considered the erection of a tent larger than 399. And then, of course, if you're doing multiple tents, say, you'll see like a pop-up markets and things like that. That's kind of a situation, because then you're dealing with, again, that square footage. You put 2 tents together, you're now over the limit. Temporary stage. This is they used to have, it's in there still, the square footage of the temporary stage. That's a very tiny stage. I have worked in that parameter just to avoid the stage requirements. Because sometimes, there's just a little extra work that needs to be done. Other things you have to think about if you're working with staging is there are very specific heights for stages that are legal. I did this wrong for many years, so I'm sharing it with you guys now to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes that I had. I didn't realize, I had a stage that was probably 16 inches taller than it was legally supposed to be. A band shell. I don't know if any of us artists are putting up a band shell, but we never know. This is a relatively new one, this next one. Outdoor projection technology. This directly applies pretty much to a lot of the projects that I'm working on now with Aurora. So I have to pay very close attention to that one. Trailers, vans, grandstands, bleachers, portable toilets, all these things. If you're doing anything on City Hall Plaza, anything, that's permit required. They have a whole section too for First Amendment permits, which doesn't really apply to our talk today, but anything that happens on the plaza is permitting required. This next one doesn't really apply to our conversation, but it's on their list, just for runs, walks, rides, and such. Signage, they're real particular about signage, where it's going, how it's going. especially as it pertains to right away. Um, it's like just be careful with your signage. Ask a lot of questions. Um, just because they'll super friendly. They'll help you walk through everything, and just get to them as soon as you receive your preliminary letter, which I'll tell you what that is in a second. And then anything that involves closing of streets in any capacity, sidewalks, all of that, automatic. Just think about it. I'm closing something, permit. Um, so say I have to apply for a permit. What happens next? You go to the website. It's pretty simple. And if you've done your due diligence and you have all your information needed because you've collected it in advance while developing the process, then you can fill out a pretty good chunk of this permit application. They'll ask you all kinds of questions, pyrotechnics, vehicles, generators, like all of that stuff will be in there. They'll want a site plan, they'll want a parking plan, they'll want to know about alcohol. So you fill that out, and then you'll have an application fee. That's pretty much based on capacity. So the smaller the event, the cheaper the permit is, application. So once you get this in, and get it in as soon as possible, there is a time window that if you don't apply soon enough, then you can't get your permit. Try to know this at least 2 months in advance, at least, if possible, because what you'll receive next is the preliminary letter. This letter it comes back. Just about everything that you need to finish is in red. So it's a yellow letter. Everything in red will be listed that you need to follow up on. There's phone numbers on there, usually if it's a piece that you need to finish. But I've also had make sure you read your letter from beginning to end completely. I've been in a situation where there was one area that wasn't highlighted red, and I came down to the wire on that one, having to figure it out. But you'll be given a time window from your preliminary letter to submit all your final paperwork. And then from there, you just wait, and hopefully everything is great. And they issue you your permit, and you're good to go. Something to think about both of these permits is, staffing. Most of them are going to require, for the tap permit, something called, you'll have to have the fire department there. It's called Fire Watch. The lower occupancy capacity events is probably just one. But there's a cost that goes with that. There's not necessarily a cost with the tap permit, but you do have to pay the city employees for being there. For these bigger events, there's a lot of police officers you may need. If there's a lot of people, you'll have to have EMTs. You'll have to have, all kinds of, private security. Just an example, on an Aurora event, this is just a weird little tidbit. I'm probably giving you guys more information or scaring you more than you need to be, because it's really not that bad. But like City Hall, you have specific security that you have to use that is that applies only to City Hall Plaza. So normally we would use a different security vendor. In this case, we have to use theirs. So it's just stuff you'll learn. Again, the easiest way to make this process easy is to make sure you do it, as far in advance as possible. Safety. This is something that'll be a part of your permitting process, but this is something I want to make sure that everybody is always thinking about at all times. Just some simple questions. Who's attending? How many people? What's the foot traffic like? Where's your entrance? Where's your exit? What's your fire safety? Just like think about it. I use this image specifically because the space between those chairs is very deliberate. It was worked through with the fire marshal. I had to have a distance that allowed for safe exit because this was a seated experience. So there were multiple aisles. I mean, not to mention the fact that it blocked the view, but that's not the reason it's there. It's actually there for safety. Uh, as far as who's attending, um, you know, uh, ADA accessibility is something that I think about all the time. I believe in making sure all events are inclusive as possible. So does it exist? Is there a way in? If it's in, is it the right slope? Uh, these are the things that I have to think about. There is a very specific degree of slope for ADA entrances. Um, Not all buildings have to have an ADA entrance because some of them are old enough that they can pass. That doesn't mean that I have not put in ADA ramps, or not that people haven't requested them of me in permits in the past either. It's a back and forth conversation. Keep in mind that the higher up your entrance is, the longer your ramp is going to be. It's just the way it works, and there's not many companies locally that install temporary ADA ramps. So if you've come up against that, please reach out anytime. Foot traffic, if you have permission, to use bright yellow spray paint or certain things, cones are my friend as much as possible, stanchions, bike rack. It's like if you can kind of corral people or keep them away from certain areas where they shouldn't be. Things that I think about, in open warehouses, because I'm there a lot, is like, where are all the electrical panels? I want to keep people away from certain areas like that. So pay attention to your foot traffic. Obviously, cabling and foot traffic is highly important. You can pretty much get away with taping it. The only problem with certain types of tape, two problems. If you use duct tape, that stuff never comes off your cables. If you use gap tape and it's unfinished cement, it's going to come up off the floor. So it's just things to think about. Little favorite store in town. It's called Nor Costco, not Costco, but Nor Costco. They sell the widest selection of gaff tape. If you like gaff tape, like I do, it's like a candy store. But they have special types of tape that have cable tracks in them, so it's sticky on two sides and no adhesive in the center. And it's got the caution, black and yellow striping. Entrance and exit, are they on stairs? If they're on stairs, are there guardrails? It's just like, I try to think of as far as attendees for any experience, like stroller to walker. It's like, I want to make sure any person in any, mobility can get in and can get out. And if they're going to have a hard time with it, how can I make it easy? Fire safety. This is something that on a TAP permit, or even, an Office of Special Event permit, you should be thinking about, not just to go by the rules, but also in case there ever is an issue. That cost of that fire extinguisher is way better than the alternative. Not all fire extinguishers are the same. The certain ones that, the fire marshal's probably going to require, they'll all have a rating. It's got a couple of letters and some numbers. So, you can kind of look up, you can purchase all of them if you need to. I think this is a great opportunity to work with whoever your property owner may be, if you're using a space. if they haven't, this is an old office warehouse or an abandoned building, just talk to them about, hey, I need to have 6 fire extinguishers. Can we work on this together? But at the end of the day, it's like, think about it. Thinking is the easiest way to get yourself out of a bind before you're in a bind. Insurance. I couldn't find a sexy image to go along with this topic because, well, there just isn't a sexy image to go along with insurance. But every permit is going to require general liability insurance. You can get just event insurance, which is totally fine. Your requirements will be listed in like your preliminary letter or in your application or that you receive back from the fire department. It's so you just, you'll fill that in, and, all your dates, all that information. Always make sure that you have install to deinstall, load in to load out, all the days covered. And sometimes, just in case, for me, I'll tack on a couple of days on the back end for whatever reason, in case there's an issue. And then just, a little note on the top, liability insurance, I personally think is a great thing to have. If you're an artist, a lot of us don't carry it. It's not that expensive. It's a good thing to have month to month. There aren't a lot of great companies that understand artists as far as general liability, but they're getting better at it. And this is just for me, for instance, being a performance artist, I'm working with people a lot. I'm in situations a lot. It's like it's something simple, but it's like, are they using a ladder? Am I using a ladder? Okay, I probably need to get insurance. So, I have it year round. So I could technically pull my own insurance permits for, or additionally insured certificates of insurance, COIs, for events, but I still go through event insurance, just as a double layer. So when you get event insurance, you also have to think about, again, additionally insured COIs, certificate of insurance. Those should be like your property owners, vendors, if you have them, like whoever. They don't cost you anything to get an additionally insured certificate. Just figure out who they all are and make sure that you have everything. This is a huge be aware of. General liability does not cover theft. So if somebody walks off with one of your paintings, your projector, anything, it's gone. It's like, but there are ways that you can work with this. Events are a little different than, say, an art exhibition. The one thing that I say you should always do is keep an incredibly detailed spreadsheet. It's annoying, but I had this screwdriver, it's this make, and model. This is the retail value, such and such and such, and do a full itemized listing of everything you have down to, the screw that's in the wall. Not that detailed, but you see what I'm saying. And then, just like I said, your permits are going to tell you what you need. So, just get what they require of you, and hopefully you'll never need it. Budgets. This is something that I come across all the time with artists that I'm working with, and really, really, really work on your budgeting process. This is where, for me, for instance, like, I'm not saying everybody's perfect at it. It's a, because I don't know all the materials I'm going to need usually in advance. But what I do is that I track everything. I create a working document. I want to know, for multiple reasons, why why things cost what they did. Could I saved money there? So on and so forth. And but also just, if you plan on getting into the habit of doing events and or exhibitions and working in wacky spaces like I love, or being outside in fields, you'll start to build a trend, understand a budgeting process for yourself. Uh, and it's like a lot of these grant applications, that if you want to move forward on some of your stuff in the future, you're going to need to have a budget. So this is just a good practice. And it just helps, tracking money is super important. And as you build up and your projects get bigger and bigger, you need to learn how to like roll with those changes and figure out, you know, where the money needs to be spent. It's like the last time, say I had an event, I'm like, wow, my security costs were, $700 more than I figured. These are important things to know. And then you can go back and be like, why was that? So, I have event C, 2 years later, I'm like, oh, same scenario. I'm going to look up, see, is the cost of that security guard still the same? And then match it to the budget that I have. I apply that to a grant, then I have the possibility of getting it covered. One thing I am terrible at, this is why I share it all the time, is that, you know, I spend a lot of money on my own personal work, and I track it because I need to know at the end of the year for multiple reasons. But, it's expensive, and uh, it also helps just for grown-up paperwork for just life in general. Promotion. This is just, as a producer, I have to think about everything. It's a one thing that usually gets left off a lot is, oh my God, I forgot to promote this. So, it's like these are just a list of things. Um, Always think about your content creation while you're developing the piece itself. Document what you can, document your space, your location hunting, build up a hype around what's going on. People pay attention to everything in the world more now than ever. And you can tailor that, you can craft it, you can weave it into the story that you want. But if you're not thinking like that, then you can't build a narrative. So, think about that. Make sure you write a press release. They are not overrated. They're still very important. Keep an updated press list. Uh, Pretty easy to find, but they change a lot. And the arts writers, there aren't as many as there used to be. So calendars are a great way to go about things. um, just kind of events calendars. You just need a little bit of time. Make sure you're thinking far enough advance and plug in your information. Get as many resources as possible, whoever you can work with. Also, is it, an email like Constant Contact, MailChimp, um, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of it. Use it to your advantage. If you don't know how to use it, get somebody that help you help you use it. I still don't understand TikTok. I don't know if I ever will, but I know it's super important. It drove huge amount of audience to an event we did last year. And so we learned like quickly, we're like, oh, we need to understand this. So, and then of course on you, if you're going to be promoting you or an organization or whatever it may be, make sure all your info on your websites, on anything that represents you, is as current as possible. Make sure your CV has everything in it. Make sure that LinkedIn profile is up to date. Make sure your Facebook, however you like to share, but just make sure it is good and ready. Because if the press does start looking, they're going to want to know more about you, and they're going to go to an online source first. My latest piece that I did, last December. I normally take months to do my own work. This one was crazy, so I realized I did it in 3 weeks. This is just another example of building in the team, thinking of, the finish before the start. And I brought in a PR team. It was amazing. It was able to gave me access to things that I just didn't have time to do, and then at the end of it all, it all comes down to time, right? It's like, how do we do our jobs and do our jobs? Artists usually are juggling many, many balls in the air. And I'm producing for organizations and myself. So I have to balance both as well. So yeah, I go the PR route. Certain things to think about. If you're going to go, if you want like a larger, editorial story in like a regional or national rag, it's like that's 3 months out. You need to have your information. It's quick. So, and you got to know, meaning quick, meaning, it's like you have to know quickly and well in advance as to what you're doing. And then another thing, promotion ties in to the end. If you didn't get your proper permitting and you didn't let everybody know you're doing this, well, you just broadcast it everywhere. So somebody's watching. So at the end of the day, get your permit. And don't ever forget to check everything twice, look through it all, and just finish before you begin. Because guys, the end is always just the beginning. Think it through.